Guys, listen, before you watch this video, we've got a promo coming up this Friday, February 21st, 2014. So be sure to subscribe to this channel because, oh, what was that? Be sure to subscribe. Hey there everyone, and welcome to this episode of Gearist TV. On today's episode, we're going to talk to you guys all about the Minimus Road 10 V2 from New Balance. The Big N. You know what's kind of cool about reviewing so many running shoes is that you get to try the latest things. You get to put on the newest technologies and see what companies are coming out to try to better themselves and to really push competition and innovation. And a lot of that time recently has been made up by shoes coming out with minimalist shoes. We've all heard about, if you run at all, we've all heard about the minimalist running movement or the natural running movement. And when New Balance initially came out with the Minimus line, what they did was they really thrust themselves to the forefront simply by name alone of the minimalist slash natural slash whatever you want to call it, running revolution. Now there are a bunch of shoes coming out, including those from New Balance itself with its fresh foam, that are a part of the Maximalist movement. Super thick, really heavily padded shoes. And the challenge in reviewing all these shoes is to really point out the minimalist shoes and the maximalist shoes, is to really be able to point out the finer details where there's really simply not a lot there. And one of the shoes that has really just kind of stood out, and it's a shoe that's a favorite of a lot of people, is the Minimus 10, and in this case the 10 V2. So we're going to get into the details of this shoe today, tell you why we like it, what we think could be improved, and basically give you a review of it. As with all our shoe reviews, the first thing that we're going to talk about with this bad boy is the midsole and the outsole right here. Now, one of the challenges, probably the biggest challenge that running shoe companies have, especially if they're trying to build a more minimalist slash natural running shoe, is to nail that outsole so that it's giving the foot a close resemblance to itself. It wants to work with the shoe, or with the foot rather, and not try to force it into having to work one way or another. A mistake that some people make in that regard is having like one big piece of rubber with no flex grooves or minimal flex grooves in it, or flex grooves at the wrong spot. Now what what New Balance has done to prevent that is they've got this kind of honeycomb structure that you can see here. What's great about this is that there are flex points all over the place. I haven't counted them, but if I had to, I'd say probably around 100 different flex points, give or take. And what's really great about that, again, is that whichever way your foot moves, some people's feet are built differently than others, and in this case, they've just accounted for pretty much a wide variety of shoes, of feet, rather. Now, as with the 1010 V2 review, which you can see right here, when we reviewed that, they used a pod system for the traction. Now, in this, they've also used kind of a pod system. You can see that these are individual little honeycombs. They're all linked by this small little strip right there. And again, it doesn't sacrifice flexibility. You can see that this thing is packable, rollable. You could probably roll it up and just shove it in your pocket across the board. Really flexible shoe. Additionally, the outsole material is Vibram rubber. Now, you guys probably know Vibram from the 5-finger shoes. If you've worn them or tried them or seen them and laughed at them, depending on who you are and what you like to wear on your feet, Vibram is a very reputable, really old, and just great hardcore rubber. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that it's the only shoe sole to ever make it to the top of Everest. Really great stuff that is super durable. These have about 70 miles on them. You may be able to see that there a little bit, and they're doing quite well. Now, the blue sections that you can see around here, that's EVA foam. In this shoe, there's a 4mm drop, difference in height from here to here. We always talk about that. Why they chose to go with 4mm drop instead of a 0mm drop, I'm not really sure. 4mm is fine with me, and it doesn't run like a 4mm drop shoe, mainly because it's so flexible, because it feels like it's such a part of your foot. So that's a nice aspect of this. Now, one other thing that I'd point out is that right in here, you can see up here, I'll pull it back, that kind of white space right there, and then again back here on the heel with the gunk kind of caught in it, you can see that white space. Now what that is, it's kind of a drain for water, I guess, or sweat or what have you. But what's really cool about that is that this shoe is so minimal, is meant to be such a part of your foot and fit like such a slipper, that is actually, that white you're seeing is the underside of the upper, which we're going to get into in a second. Super flexible, super lightweight. There's just not a lot extra there. Now it looks, of course, pretty complex because of the honeycomb structure, but again, that cuts weight because you don't have a lot of superfluous material around there, and it also really adds to that flexibility, which is a huge selling point in my opinion. Now let's get into the upper of the shoe. Now, in a lot of shoes these days, people are saying one-piece construction of the upper and what have you, and that's pretty much the case. But in this case, it's actually really the case. This is a single piece. As you can see here, this rubber that comes around, not rubber, this mesh that comes around, actually spills into a medial side tongue, which is actually not a tongue in the traditional sense, so it's not really attached right here as a normal tongue would be. This is actually a continuation of the medial material of the shoe. You can see it kind of rolls up there. Now these lace eyelets here that kind of stick out, those are completely added on after the fact. Really cool system, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The material itself is a really nice, pretty durable mesh actually, and you can see the support elements are heat bonded. For the toe element, I was a little curious as to why they didn't carry it down all the way to the toe cap, which would have added for a little bit more toe durability. Now, in my case, I didn't have any issues. There are no tears or nicks or anything like that, but I do know that it is definitely a tendency of some people, especially those getting into minimalist or natural or barefoot style running for the first time, to really kind of overstride and land out on that forefoot. And what happens then, which by the way is incorrect, unless you're a sprinter, what happens then is that you're driving that toe forward into the shoe, and you're really going to compromise the durability of the toe area. So it seems to me that that would be a pretty easy tweak, just to pull that down or just extend it a little bit more, not even to move it from where it is. Now, the rest of the strapping you can see here is built into the design elements, the logos and things like that here on the medial side. And then here on the lateral side, they've even incorporated the upper arm or the back arm, depending on which way you look at it, of the N, which goes right down under the heel bone right there, creating a nice, solid, really wrapped feel of the foot. As with most minimal shoes, there is no heel counter in this guy. For all intents and purposes, there's nothing. But what there is this piece of kind of leather or pleather right back here off the back, which does just give it a little bit of structure. So otherwise your shoe's not sitting around like this all the time, unless you're my wife and you like to stand on shoes. But this little piece of leather gives it a little bit of structure, as does this part where the midsole kind of rides up the backside of the heel there. It's not adding any traditional heel cup rigidity, but what it's just doing is offering a tiny bit of structure. Now, the tongue, let's get back to that a little bit. Some people I have heard say that the tongue, or the midfoot of this felt a little bit baggy. In my case, I didn't feel like that. I have a really average foot. My foot's not narrow, it's not wide, it's not high volume, it's not low volume. My arch is good, but in general, it's not something that's going to take up a terrible amount of volume, and I didn't find it to be baggy. I think one of the reasons is because when I put the shoe on, what's interesting to me is because the laces on the medial side are set up the way they are, this tongue can really wrap around the foot. Now that may create some fabric pinching up here depending on the shape and structure of your foot, but in general I didn't find it difficult at all to get this to really hug my foot just the way that I wanted to. Internally, you can see that yes, there are a couple pieces that are not kind of holding up that single piece construction, but that is essentially just a mesh piece right here that's really meant to hold in that heel and to keep it kind of locked in and not create too much abrasion. Additionally, the whole entire upper, especially down the midfoot and forefoot, is backed with a smooth, really soft mesh that's going to keep out fine debris, but it's also going to make it comfortable for barefoot. Now, the sock liner, which you can see right in there, is completely integrated into the shoe. That does not come out. That's part of the shoe. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you take this guy out because of these drain holes and because of how closely this fits to the upper, fits to the outsole, you're going to get wet. Not just from the upper if it's a rainy day, but if there are puddles and it's a totally sunny day, you're going to get wet because this thing and this thing, these holes that I mentioned, are close to the ground. So just something to be aware of. All right, let's talk about the fit of the shoe. First off, sizing. spot on. I wear an 11, this is 11, and it nailed it. This fits the way that I really wanted it to. The toe box is pretty ample. It's nice and generous. I would like to see maybe a little more curvature on the lateral toe, just a little bit wider. Not a ton, but a hair. This seems to be designed naturally, yes, to a natural foot last. However, it also seems to be designed to a Western foot last, which, if you know a lot about the way that Western feet are, or traditionally shod feet, and so it's not necessarily Western feet, but generally civilized culture feet, our feet are pretty deformed. The way that our little toe comes in and our big toe comes in, that's a deformity. That's something that has happened by us wearing constrictive footwear for the large majority of our lives and not spending enough time barefoot. If you see people that are indigenous peoples, you see like some Aboriginal tribes or something like that, what you're going to see is you're going to see a foot that is nice and splayed. There's space between all the toes. That is the way that a foot is supposed to look like. Not this natural foot that has somehow become elegant looking. And so I feel like this right here is a little narrow, a little early. So if they could bump the width a little bit higher, I feel like that would be a little bit better for my taste. But in general, the toe box is really nice. There's plenty of fabric, plenty of wiggle room. You can see how tall that is there. Really great. And again, the sizing is right on. Again, some people have mentioned that they felt this was a little baggy. I didn't have that problem at all. In fact, this is probably one of the more comfortable shoes that I've really ever worn in terms of just its quietness on the foot. There's not a lot going on there. It's nice and calm. It just kind of sits on the foot and becomes part of the foot, and I really like that. And I really credit the flexibility of the bottom as well as that wraparound effect of the upper. I credit that with that kind of feel that I really got out of that. Now let's talk about the ride of the 10v2 Road. Now, it's a great ride, okay? It's really nice and quiet, and just like any minimalist shoe, true minimalist shoe, if you don't want to have a lot of ground feel and really be in contact with what you're doing, probably not going to be the shoe for you. However, even if you've not worn a minimalist or natural running shoe before, this may be a good spot to try because there is enough underfoot as well as enough cushioning to make it something viable for even a novice minimalist or barefoot style or natural runner. One of the things that I will point out, this was not really an issue for me, but it is definitely apparent. This honeycomb structure here that you see, because there's no strobel board per se, which is basically the board or stiffer material that rides in between the upper and the outsole, or excuse me, the midsole. There's no real strobel board in this. What the result of that is that this honeycomb structure is very apparent underfoot at times. Now, I noticed it in 2 runs. I didn't notice it immediately, but it was definitely apparent later on into runs. And I've even heard people, I've not experienced this myself, I'm just saying that I've heard people that they've done longer runs, and I mean longer like an hour and a half plus. They've done longer runs and they've taken these shoes off just to find little kind of indentations. Not blisters or anything like that, but definitely indentations. And maybe something that's a little uncomfortable to you. It wasn't something that I noticed, and I've run in this up to an hour and a half. Didn't really bug me, but it is definitely something that you can feel. So just be aware of that. And if I would say that if you're putting it on for the first time and you really notice and you're like, oh my God, then maybe go in a different direction or put some sort of additional EVA sock liner in there. But not a huge deal. In general, the ride is really nice. It's very comfortable, very quiet. This is a pure road shoe. Again, do not take this bad boy on a trail, because as soon as you hit anything more than just say like pebbles, if you run with this in rough gravel, you're going to be in for quite a shock. It's not meant to be run on that. There's no rock plate. It is simple Vibram rubber overlaying really flexible, which is going to add to that ability to feel those rocks, EVA foam. So great ride on the road, not really meant for trails. Currently, you can find the 10v2 on Amazon or wherever for about $75, which is marked down from originally $110. Now, for a shoe that is super minimal like this, that's going to be well within the price range of dedicated minimalist or natural runners, as well as newbies, people looking to try it out. Now, there's the CrossFit phase, or craze, if you will. There's the CrossFit craze, and people wanting to get into the gym. I personally have worn this to the gym several times, and I don't do CrossFit, but I have done more dynamic workouts like that, and it works really well for that. It's wide base, which you can see there, gives a lot of balance, as well as the ground feel and flexibility of the shoe. It really adds well to that. At 6.5 ounces, super light. Really great lightweight shoe. I mean, there's just not a lot that can be said about the weight. It's really pleasant weight, and it disappears on the foot nicely. With its super flexible and minimalist construction, this shoe is going to be a favorite of dedicated minimalist runners as well as newbies alike. And again, this is going to be something that's going to work for you in the gym if you're a CrossFit fanatic. Definitely a shoe that really works with the foot, doesn't try to make the foot do things. It's meant to just sit on your foot and disappear, and it does a good job of that. And again, it's $75. How can you really pass up at least trying a pair of these on? Thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of Gearist TV. Don't forget to subscribe. There are promotions coming up. Even if you're watching this a year after it was initially filmed, there are promotions coming up, I promise. And if you want to be included on those promotions and find out when they are and find out what the prizes are and how to enter, definitely subscribe right now. There's going to be a subscription button right here in just a couple of minutes. But first, please click on over to Gearist.com. Take a look around at all of our other reviews. Also, take a look at here at our channel. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you guys. We're going to start doing a thing where we talk about the comments and questions that you guys have had and kind of put those out on the air. So definitely leave your comments. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want to be able to kind of have a conversation with you. So again, thank you so much for joining. Click on over to Gearist.com. Subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time.
Hey there everyone, and thanks so much for watching this episode of Gearist TV. Please click on that wonderful, beautiful blue subscribe button right there. Also, if you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the questions and comments section below. And don't forget to visit Gearist.com. We'll talk to you next time.